And we just do some invocations. Om Jnana Timirandasya, Jnananjana Shalakaya, Chakshurun Militam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Shrimate Bhaktivedanta, Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Praschatyadeshatarine. Akandam Mandalakaram, Yena Vyaptam Characharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindai. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe, Vrindavaneshwari, Vishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hare Priya. Apavitra Pavitro Va, Sarva Vastagato Viva, Ya Smaret Pundarika Ksham, Sa Bhaya Vyantara Shuchihe. Good evening. It's been a hectic day because I think I told you I have this massive collection of Indological books, thousands. But let's get to the point where, it's time to give everything away. So giving the whole thing away and packing all day. And just keeping core canonical texts. Enough with scholasticism, enough with intellectuality. It's time to go deep. And I smash my forward head up. Okay, and have a good look at the backdrop. I may give that away too, so that may not be there next week. It's quite beautiful, but it should be in a cultural center. It's a museum piece. Right, you don't want to hear all of that. What we're here to do is the Upanishads. Okay, so we're going to go into the Chandogya today, and we'll bring it up. And if you have your Chandogyas, if you have Oliver, I don't know why the page numbers of this one are different from mine. Must be a different edition. Oh, this is the Sanskrit one. So we're in the, if you have this one, doesn't have a cover. If you have the paperback Olival, it's page 130. And this is, it's just a cool story. And I want to just say something before we start. Because I had somebody email me and they read some passages in the Brihad and it was quite awful about, beating your wife and stuff like that. And obviously, one wonders, well, how can an enlightened text include things like that? And I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, the entire literature of the whole world, pretty much up until, I don't know, still now, but certainly up until the women's suffragette movement, certainly up until the 20th century, it's all sexist, it's all racist, it's all awful, it's all. So that's just, and if we're going to toss out a sacred text because it contains some of those elements, then you have to toss out all scriptural texts whatsoever. Buddhist, Taoist, biblical, everything goes out. So these texts reflect their culture. And as yogis and Vedantins, we're not interested in material culture. But the Vedantins, when they engage the Vedic texts, are engaging them for knowledge of Brahman and knowledge of Atman. And as yogis, when we engage these texts, likewise, we're also looking for method. So if you do some reading on your own, and you'll encounter, just like in the Old Testament, you have all that sexist stuff and awful stuff about chopping people's hands off if they steal. You'll find that in every tradition. So my suggestion is that's of interest to the historian. If you're interested in the history and the social systems of ancient India, then you're going to read the Upanishads with that lens, looking for that sort of information. But I'm assuming most of us are Vedantins or yogis, and we're looking for information about deep, the things that transcend culture and social systems and political systems and all the isms of racisms and sexisms and all of those isms. The Atman transcends all of that. And knowledge of Brahman. So therefore, let us look for the gold, even if the gold is in a dirty place. That's the metaphor I like to use. Even if it's embedded in the social context that is no longer acceptable in our day and age. Maybe in 50 years' time, people will say, look at those people, they killed animals and they ate them. How barbaric. And and maybe they won't want to read our texts. So let's keep that in mind. If you do your own reading, I'm focusing on yogi and yoga friendly passages, Vedanta friendly passages, Jnana friendly passages. I'm picking out passages that will speak to us in the 21st century as practitioners. But don't be surprised if you run into all kinds of things in the Upanishads, including things that we may find unpalatable in our modern sensitivity. Just want to throw that out. Let's be mature. Let's understand the ancient world was everywhere, was full of isms that we nowadays are trying to purge ourselves of, including the spiritual traditions. Okay, now here's a little passage. I just think it's cool. I just think it's not really an Atman yogi passage, but I want to share it with you. Okay, so here we have our friend Satyakama, one whose desire is true, right? Kama, you've heard of Kama Sutra, and Satya. So some of these words you may actually be familiar with. One whose desire comes true. So one day, Satyakama Jabala said to his mother, Jabala, it's not the same. Notice that's got a line on the first A. So ladies have, a short A is always going to be a male name. Long A is always going to be a lady's name. So you have to pay attention because in English we put a line on it, but in Sanskrit it's a different phoneme. It's written differently. So the ladies are going to be now, she's Jabala. And what happens is the son of someone or daughter of someone or the follower of someone, you elongate the first vowel. That's how you get Vaishnava from Vishnu, Shaiva from Shiva, Vasudeva from Vasudeva. Okay, so because he's the son, his first phoneme gets elongated. So you see the line there, Ja, and he's a male, so he's not going to have a long A. So it looks like it's the same, but actually it's completely different. So Jabala said to his mother, Jabala, mother, I want to become a Vedic student. So tell me what my lineage is. Okay, Vedic. So the expectation is that to study the Vedas, you need to be a Brahmin. So that was the expectation. Still today, the really orthodox Vedanta traditions, the real orthodox Brahmins, they only teach male Brahmins. So she replied, this is the cool bit, son, I don't know what your lineage is. I was young when I had you. I was a maid then and I had a lot of relationships. So you wouldn't expect to find something like that in the Upanishads, but there is. And you know what the Sanskrit is? I had a lot of relationships. Bahu Gamani. I went around, I've been around a lot. I don't know about it in America, but in UK English, you say if someone's been around a lot, male or female, it means they've had a lot of relationships. So there it is, right? The Upanishads. She doesn't know who his father was because she had lots of relationships. I was young when I had you. I was a maid then. I had a lot of relationships. As such, it's impossible for me to say what your lineage is. But my name is Jabala and your name is Satyakama. So you should simply say, when you approach the teacher, right, he wants to go and find a teacher, and he knows the teacher's going to say, are you a Brahmin? What's your lineage? So not just are you a Brahmin, but what's your Brahmin lineage? There are 10 Brahmin families in ancient India, coming down from 10 original progenitor Brahmin lineages to this day. So you should simply say that you're Satyakama Jabala. So off he goes, Satyakama. He went to Haridrumata Gautama, nice Brahmin name, and said, sir, I want to live with you as a Vedic student. Because that's what you did in those days. It was called the Gurukula. So you lived in the house of the Guru. I want to live as a Vedic student. I come to you, sir, as a student. So Haridrumata immediately asked him, son, what's your lineage? And he replied, sir, I don't know what my lineage is. That's the kiss of death. If you're you don't want to say that to a Brahmin. I don't know who my dad is. I mean, but that is the kiss of death if you want to study Vedic knowledge. I don't know what, but notice how honest he is. Notice how honest he is. In fact, his very name is Satyakama. I don't know what my lineage is. When I asked my mother, can you imagine saying this? She replied, exactly verbatim. I was young when I had you. I was a maid then and had a lot of relationships. As such, it's impossible for me to say what your lineage is, right? Just a repetition of what's up there. But my name is Jabala and your name is Satyakama. So I am Satyakama Jabala, sir. Now, Hari Drumata then told him, who but a Brahmin could speak like that? Two ways of reading that. Two ways of reading that, my friends. One is, it doesn't matter what your lineage is. It doesn't matter if you're not a Brahmin, but to have that level of truthfulness, you have the quality of a Brahmin, and I don't care what your lineage is because you have the qualities of a Brahmin. Way number one. Way number two, well, your father, you don't know who your father was, but he must have been a Brahmin. So that's still embedded in the caste consciousness. He must have been a Brahmin because you're truthful. So just by that fact alone, we know that your father was a Brahmin, therefore you're a Brahmin, therefore I can teach you. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? Interpretation number one is, I don't care what your father is. You're truthful, and all I care about is the qualities of a Brahmin. One who knows Brahman is truthful. Satyam, right? That's the first way. That's an anti-caste way. That's a Brahmin by qualification way. That Brahmins are those who have Ya Brahman Veti Sa Brahmanaha. The one who knows Brahman, that one is the Brahmin. So that's the one way. Who cares about lineage? We care about qualities. The other way is a caste way. We do care about lineage. But because you're truthful, your mom must have had a lot of relationships, but somewhere along the way, she must have had a relationship with a Brahmin, and that was your dad, because only Brahmins, we only initiate Brahmins, but you must be a Brahmin because you're truthful. So these are the kinds of interesting things that you run into sometimes. Just interesting, quirky things, like remember the reincarnation last week. It was only in the hands of the Brahmins. So sometimes you run into these fascinating passages that give us a glimpse into ancient India, and also the fact that not everybody was conservative, and we think of India today as very conservative, but his mom, she clearly wasn't embarrassed about her, the fact that she's had a lot of relationships. So who but a Brahmin could speak like that? Fetch some firewood, son. When it says that, it means I'm going to initiate you. So instead of saying I will give you initiation, the motif is fetch firewood. When the guru says that to you, you're good, you're in. You're going to initiate you, and the firewood is for the sacred fire of initiation. Instead of saying, I will initiate you, the Upanishads always say, fetch some firewood. In fact, when you approach the teacher, the way you serve the teacher in this ancient tradition, because you ask questions, but you have to serve the teacher, but the teacher's living in a mud hut, what are you going to give him? What are you going to give him? Lives in a mud hut, wears a loincloth, what are you going to give him? So actually you bring firewood. That's the motif. You bring firewood for the guru, because the gurus, many of them are still Brahmins doing their Vedic, even though they're pursuing Brahman, they're not doing Vedic ritualism to get petty material boons like the mainstream society is, but they're doing it just out of Dharma. That's Dharma. Like Krishna says, do your Dharma with no attachment. So they're Brahmins, their lineage is to perform Vedic sacrifice. They do it even in the forest, just as Dharma. They're not asking for anything. They're not asking the celestials for stuff. So fetch some firewood, son. I'll perform your initiation. You have not strayed from the truth. And then okay. So that I don't know if you find that interesting. I found that a fascinating passage. All right. So then we'll go to 140. But I think we've had this. Why did we have the passage? Why does the world up there not fill up? Do you remember that? And that was when
we haven't begun with Chandogya.
Pardon?
Right, but we did talk about that idea.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Good. Okay. Why the world up there does not fill up? See, I have two different. I've got two different. I've got my page numbers are for the one with the Sanskrit, so I'm going to have to flick through the whole thing now. Okay, and then we have these early passages of, we've had, the first references to reincarnation. Well, let's have a look at another one like that. 5:10. A lot of it is we don't know what it means. So fire, that's what a man is. Gautama, his firewood is speech, his smoke is breath. It's like a lot of it. It's esoteric, and and connected to esoteric interpretations of ritualism. And I don't think we necessarily understand a lot of it. So we're obviously skipping all of those passages. Okay, so sorry about that. 142. So that's 5:10:7. 5:10. Now, people here whose behavior is pleasant, and here you see casteism and reincarnation. People here whose behavior is pleasant can expect to enter a pleasant womb, like that of a woman of the Brahman, the Kshatriya, or the Vaishya class. But people of foul behavior can expect to enter a foul womb, like that of a dog, a pig, and see, we're not happy with this, or an outcast woman. But it's there in the Upanishads. Casteism is there, and it's not, we're not focusing on it, but at the same time, we cannot just gloss over it. We have to be aware that we see this type of attitude of course, bhakti sweeps all that away right from the very beginning. Bhakti sweeps that away. So jnana, if you want jnana, you have to approach a jnana teacher. You need to be a Brahmin or a higher caste. So that is elitist. Vedic ritualism, hyper elitist, super elitist. I told you last week, right? If you're a Brahmin and you're going to perform your ritual, and an outcast, the shadow of the outcast touches you. The shadow, my friends, not the hand, not nothing. The shadow. You got to go back and take another bath. So there is right wing, as every tradition has. Read the Old Testament, read any of these traditions. There's also that aspect to Hinduism. So we're not going to dwell on that, but at the same time, we need to bring it up because you run into it, and then you'll say, "Oh, how can this be? All this lovely yoga and high philosophy. How can it be mixed in with this stuff?" Well, it is mixed in with that stuff. Just in every religion, it's mixed in with that stuff. So just be mature, and we are yogis, and we're going to take the money and run. We're going to take the Atman and the Brahman and the yoga, and we're going to run with that. But this other stuff is there. So occasionally we need to sort of at least be aware of it, if nothing else. Okay, so 148, and then we get to our Svetaketu. Here he is, chapter 6. Svetaketu. He's a famous student in the Upanishads. Okay, we're looking for 5:24. We're on 6 already. And back we go. 5:21. Do you want chapter 6? What's chapter 6? Chapter 6. There it is. There was one Svetaketu, son of Aruni, right? We met him before, remember? He was the one that went to the king and asked the questions, and the king, and then he went and he couldn't answer any of the questions of the king, and he went back to his father and he said, that useless king, he asked me these questions, I couldn't answer any of them. And the father said, who was a sincere yogi, he said, oh, let's go and study with him. And the kid said, no, I'm not going. He's a kshatriya, he's a warrior. So that same puffed up Svetaketu, he's still puffed up, son of Aruni. One day his father told him, Svetaketu, take up the celibate life of the student. Now, do we know what that is in Sanskrit from Patanjali? How about brahmacharya? So brahmacharya is, in Patanjali, you have to be brahmacharya, whoever you are, whatever stage of life you're in. If you want to attain a state of chitta vritti nirodha, which is Patanjali's project, right in the second sutra, Atta Yoganushāsanam, first sutra, Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. For the mind to be in a state of complete nirodha, it has to be 100% sattvic. And therefore it has to be trained to be sattvic through Kriya Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, chapter 2. And sattvic means not rajasic. And obviously the most powerful raga is the sexual raga. So if the mind is afflicted by sexual desires, then it's going to be rajasic, and therefore it's not going to be able to enter into that sattvic state required for high-level meditation. So for Patanjali, he says these yamas, jati, ayo, desha, kala, samaya, and avichinna. There's no exception based on your caste, based on your jati, ayo, age. Doesn't matter which stage of life you're in. Remember the Vedic, the stages of life in the normal, not non-yogic, but the normal Vedic culture, 25, 25, 25, 25. You're a brahmachari for the first 25 years, that's it. You're a student. And then 25 years celibate. And then 25 years husband and wife go back, 25 years celibate student, 25 years householder, and you have a family, you have sexual affair relations with your wife. And then 50 to 75, husband and wife become celibate again and become like a yogi couple. They sort of hand over the family affairs. If you're a Brahmin, you hand over your ritualistic practices to your trained children. If you're a warrior, they sort of take over your function. If you're a businessman, then they sort of take over the family business. So that's the normal thing. You're only brahmachari for the first 25 years. But if you're going to do, that's karma yoga or other kinds of yoga, bhakti yoga, dharma, all of that. But if you're doing Patanjali yoga, you have to be brahmachari right from the get-go. If you want to do that, that's why he says jati ayor. Jati ayor desha. It doesn't matter what age you're in, what stage of life you're in. If you want to do chitta vritti nirodha, that's a different rules then. Now you have to be 100% sattvic, if that's your chosen path. But this here is a reflection of the conventional system where you're only brahmachari for 25 years. So one day his father told him, Svetaketu, take up the brahmacharya life. And now notice this. You see, you can read between the lines. Historians, when they're looking for sort of historical, they're looking, let's say, for the origins of the caste system. Then these kinds of passages are interest to them. There's no one in our family, my son, who was not studied and who is the kind of Brahmin who is so only because of birth. Notice that. He's saying, our family, we're real Brahmins. We study but we're not like these other Brahmins who've just claimed to be Brahmins by birth. So right back then, whatever we want to date this, as scholars will say this is 8th to 6th century BCE. Right back then, they were Brahmins who prided themselves on being real Brahmins, and they had the qualities of a Brahmin, like Aruni in this passage. But there were other Brahmins who claimed to be Brahmins by birthright, just as we have today. So that type of attitude goes right back here to this is the oldest Upanishad, second oldest Upanishad, usually considered, more or less the same date as the Brihad, Aranyaka, or maybe a little later. So again, historical information, and in our workshop, we're occasionally we'll discuss a passage or two like that, but we're really interested in yoga and Jnana. We're interested in Jnana. So he went away, did Svetaketu, to become a student at the age of 12, right? So 12 to 25. And after learning all the Vedas, this is the Vedas, not the Vedanta, not the Upanishads. What are the Vedas? The ritualistic, the hymns that you chant at the fire sacrifice, so that you do your fire sacrifices so that you can, get material boons. Okay? Very materialistic. If you read the Rig Veda, Penguin has a hymns to the Rig Veda, read them. There's nothing spiritual about them whatsoever. They're lusty hymns, just like Greco-Roman. You worship, you do sacrifice to the gods to get stuff. Extremely materialistic. And the Upanishads don't reject them because you can't reject the Vedas. If you're a Brahmin, you have to accept the whole corpus. But what they say is the earlier corpus, what they call the Karma Kanda, later comes to be known as the Karma section, that's for materialistic people. You can't reject it. You have to find a way of embracing it, but also minimizing it. And that's how you do it in Vedanta. You say, this older Vedic stuff with the rituals and the fire sacrifice, that's for materialistic, worldly people. But we, the Vedantins who study the Upanishads, those who study the Vedanta, the highest part of the Veda, Vedanta. Anta can either mean the highest part, the highest teaching of the Veda, or it can be the final teaching of the Veda. And that's how the Vedanta sees themselves. They say, okay, when you've done with all this ritualism and you get fed up, and
I apologize. Then I said, please don't rub it in, and then you're like, you're so snappy.
Oh, I should probably mute everybody. I did mute everybody. It never works, because there's a thing here which says mute everybody upon entry, and it never works. It says mute people present and future, and it just doesn't work. But it doesn't matter, right? So, right. So this is okay. So these are ritualistic Brahmins. We already knew that because the father didn't even know about the reincarnation. How far away from Jnana can you be if you've never even heard of reincarnation? That's how ritualistically embedded they were. They hadn't even thought about, well, what happens at death? The king asked those questions. What happens at death? Why does that world up there not fill up? You Vedic ritualist people, you want to go to the celestial realm. Why does the world up there not fill up then? And he didn't have a good answer. So he went away to become a student at the age of 12. And after learning all the Vedas, remember, this is not Vedanta, not Upanishads, not the sutras. This is the ritualistic caste Brahmin professional texts which you recite during the rites to the celestials. Okay? And it sounds like this. It's quite beautiful. But when you hear chants like that, you know it's from the old Vedas. So he went away to become a student at the age of 12. And after learning all the Vedas, returned when he was 24, right? So remember, brahmachari lasts till you're 25. Swell-headed. Is really taking it. See how they're taking a dig? The Upanishads are taking a subtle dig at the Vedic, those who study the Vedas. You just get swell-headed and you know nothing. You don't even know what happens when you die. You don't even know, nothing about reincarnation. So he returns swell-headed, thinking himself to be learned and arrogant. Got his PhD from Harvard, comes back to the village. His old man's works in, he works in a garage, and he sticks his nose up at his dad. That's Svetaketu. His father said to him, Svetaketu, here you are, my son. Now remember, his father has actually gone off and he'd studied with King Janaka, remember in the previous story? So I'm inferring, then he didn't know anything. He was sincere, heard about stuff he didn't know, and then as a sincere seeker, he went, and even though it was a warrior and it was below his caste, he nonetheless studied. So I'm assuming now he has that knowledge. All right, so why am I assuming that? Follow the story. His father then said to his son, right, Svetaketu, here you are, my son, swell-headed, thinking yourself to be learned and arrogant. So you must have, now he's being sarcastic, just like the king was. So you must have surely asked about that. Sometimes he translates Upanishad as a rule of substitution. I don't agree with that. So wherever it says rule of substitution, just put back in the original Sanskrit Upanishad. You must surely have asked about that Upanishad, by which one hears what has not been heard of before, thinks of what has not been thought of before, and perceives what has not been perceived before. Clearly, these are the kind of language we found when we talk about the Atman. It's something which you hear about, but has never been heard of before, and so forth. How indeed does that Upanishad work, sir? So now his father is instructing his son in Vedanta, Jnana. Okay, can I use the word Jnana? Jnana means knowledge. When we use the word Jnana, it means knowledge of the Atman. That's what Jnana means, Jnana. And there are different Jnana traditions. The Upanishads are a Jnana tradition. Vedanta is a Jnana tradition. Sankhya is a Jnana tradition, and there's others you've probably not encountered, Nyaya and Vaisheshika, from the 6 schools of Indian philosophy. Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, 3 of them at least, and Vedanta to some extent, although Vedanta is also Bhakti, so it's Jnana and Bhakti, are Jnana traditions. Okay, Patanjali's, it's going to sound the same, but it's different. DH, Dhyana, like the 7th limb of yoga, Dhyana. The Dhyana tradition is Patanjali. That's a Dhyana tradition, which means meditation, which means that the practice is a Chittavritti Nirodha, stilling of the mind practice. Okay, the goal is the same of jnana and dhyana. The goal is the same, and that is experience of the innermost Atman, deep level self Atman. Bhakti, which we find in the later Upanishads, we'll see it when we get to the Shvetashvatara very strongly. Bhakti is the tradition that, there is the Atman, it includes the Atman, but it supersedes the Atman and takes one to a place beyond the little Atman to the Paramatma, Bhagavan, Ishvara. So it is a relationship between Atman and Bhagavan. So when we use the term bhakti, that's how we use it. Okay. This is Jnana, J-N. So how does this Upanishad work, sir? It's like this, my son. By means of just one lump of clay, one would perceive everything made of clay. If you see a lump of clay, then there's a clay pot, the clay dish, so many clay things, vase. So by means of one lump of clay, you perceive everything made of clay because the substance is the same. The transformation of the clay, let's say, into a pot, or the clay into a plate, that transformation is a verbal handle. What's a verbal handle? Well, we have to name things, otherwise how can we function in the world? So language is a handle. It allows us to sort of grab things, and it's a verbal handle, because I say this is a pot and that is a plate. Now you know, well, this is a pot, that's a plate. So these are handles, meaning in sort of convenient conventions that allow us to function. So to say that this is a lump of clay and that's a pot, and that's just the transformation of clay into a pot. By the way, they always use pot. Indian philosophers, when they want to talk about an object in the world, so they need to have an object. They can't just name all the objects in the world. There's an infinity of objects. They say a pot. Let the pot stand for any object in the world. So it's the stand-in kind of placeholder for any object out there. They call it a pot. So the transformation of clay into a pot is a verbal handle, a name. But what's the reality? The reality is just this. It's clay. So what's the teaching, my friend? The teaching is everything is Brahman. And Brahman transforms into the world of mountains and universes and oceans and trees and bodies. But ultimately it's all Brahman. The very definition of Brahman in the Vedānta Sutra, Sutra number 2, just like Patanjali gives his definition of yoga, Sutra number 2 of the Yoga Sutra. The first sutra just introduces it, Atta Yoga Anushasanam. And then Sutra number 2, he defines it, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, exactly the same thing with the Vedānta Sutra. First verse introduces it. Atato Brahma Jignasu. Now we're going to inquire into Brahman. And then he defines it. What is Brahman? Janmadhyasya yata. That from which creation emerges. Creation and maintenance and eventually the dissolution of the universe goes back to Brahman. So that's the transformation. The Brahman transforms into the world, and then we add all these verbal handles. We say this is a tree, and that's a mountain, and that's Venus, and that's Mars, and this, and we give names. They're just handles. The handle is something that allows you to pick a cup up. It's convenient, a convenient piece of appendage to the cup. Okay, but what's the reality? It's just Brahman. And in Upanishadic style, it repeats it 3 times with a different metaphor. It's like this, my son. By means of just one copper trinket, you perceive everything made of copper. Why? Because they're all copper. The transformation is a verbal handle, a name. Well, the reality is just this is copper. You want to say copper ring, a copper bracelet, a copper cup, a copper this and that. Those are verbal handles. What is it really? Copper. So this world is Brahman. Remember, that's where the metaphors are going. It's like this, my son. So 3 times, by means of just one nail cutter. They had nail cutters. God knows what they were like. Probably take your finger off. By means of just one nail cutter, one would perceive everything made of iron. Right? Iron nail cutter, iron fork, iron anything. The transformation from iron into whatever, it's a verbal handle. So the last part is exactly the same. A name. Well, the reality is just this. What is the reality? It's iron. That, son, is how this Upanishad works. The Upanishads are teaching us what is the foundational truth of reality, my friends. Right? Now, they tell us what our foundational truth is in our own innermost self, Atman, and they tell us what the foundational truth of the entire cosmos is, Brahman. And somehow or other, those 2 things, the Atman and Brahman, are intimately connected. and how that connection is formulated is what divides, one of the main issues that divides the different Vedanta lineages a millennium later. Advaita Vedanta, Vishishta Dvaita, Dvaita Dvaita. Is that Atman and Brahman absolutely one and the same? And when you become enlightened, there's no more you. You now become that Brahman with no conditions. Utterly, there's no more you. There's just infinite sarvamidam kalu Brahman, infinite, all-pervading Brahman, and you're just sort of, you are that, or are you an eternal Atman and you have and Brahman is a personal being, and you may have the qualities of Brahman, but you're still individualized in a minute sort of way. You have the minute qualities of Brahman, like the spark of the fire in relation to the fire, and you have this eternal relationship of devotion and love. And those are the Vaishnava Vedanta lineages, such as that of Krishnamacharya and Guruji Iyengar, and I mention them only because you're likely to know those two names. But obviously, they are rich and they are intellectually rich, and they're probably the dominant traditions in India. And you recognize them because the sacred clay goes up. When the sacred clay goes up, Guruji, Krishnamacharya's is white and red, but the lines are going up. Other Vedanta lineages, which are, let's call them monotheistic, they accept a being, a God, the supreme God, and the soul is distinct. When they wear their sacred lineage clay, it goes up. Now, whether it's yellow, whether it's red, whether it's white and red, that is an indicator of the lineage. The monists, non-dualists, this way. 3 lines this way. And they would be the Advaita and such lineages. So just remember the teacher said to him, what's your lineage? To Satyakama. In India, you look at someone's sacred clay, you know everything about their lineage. And if you don't, and if they're not, of course, those who wear sacred clay are a little bit more heavy duty, they're sort of really involved in, let's say they're just a Brahmin and they're not, that dedicated, then you ask the name. It doesn't have to be a Brahmin. Anyone gives you a name in India, if they're a Patel, then they're the merchant class, instantly. They're from Gujarat and they're merchant, Patel, then bang, just nailed right away, or whatever the names are. And so that would have been the same in the West. Smith would have been a Smith once upon a time. So that son is how this Upanishad works. So now the son realizes that all these Vedic ritualist people, they didn't know anything about any of this. They just taught him how to chant mantras and perform a sacrifice, and when to throw the grains in, and when do you chant this hymn, and when do you chant that hymn, and what sacrifice do you do if you want a birth of a child, and what sacrifice do you do if you want it to rain, and there's material stuff. So the son says, now he's a bit more humble than the other. Surely those illustrious, he calls them, remember what he called the prince? What did he call him? That farthing of a prince. That's how Olivel translated it. Dismissive. Here, he calls them illustrious men. Why? Because they were Brahmins. The son is a caste Brahmin. Father is a yogi and a jnani. You see, are you picking up on this? Yeah? So he said, unlike with the king, the son said, I'm not studying with the king, he's in the lower caste. Here he's praising them, but he also realizes they haven't taught him. Surely those illustrious men did not know this, for had they known, how could they have not told it to me? So why don't you, sir, tell me yourself? And the father goes, all right, I'll tell you. In the beginning, son, this world was simply what is existent. The Sanskrit for existent, my friends, is Sat. You have all heard Satchidananda. So this is the Sat part of that triad, that phrase. Sat means that which always is. So you can call it the existence, then that's fine. One only, without a second. Now look at this. Very interesting. Remember the Genesis? God creates the world out of nothing, and God creates the soul out of ex nihilo. That no Indian philosopher is even ever given that that proposal the time of day. Just dismiss it out of hand. Look at this. This is one of the earliest. No one engages that because they don't consider it worthy of engagement. It's not like, I mean, Indian philosophy is really deep and rich, and they know when there's opposing points of view, they debate. They don't run away. In fact, when you in the commentaries, they always introduce the opposing points of view. And they say, well, look, if you say this and the Buddhists say that, and here's how we respond. And then if you say, and then if you tweak your position and then say this, well, then we'll tweak ours. And then we say that. It's very rich like that. This is not even engaged. But he brings it up. Now, on this point, some do say in the beginning, this world was simply what is non-existent, nothing, one only without a second. And from what is non-existent was born what is existent. In other words, the soul was created, right? Because the soul is Sat. And he's saying from the non-existence that there was nothing, and then the soul was created. And look at what he says. But son, how can that possibly be? He continued. How can what is existent be born from what is non-existent? Doesn't even mount a philosophical rationale for rejecting it. It doesn't even consider it worthy of engaging. Very interesting. The idea of ex nihilo, which in Latin means from nothing, right? The God creates ex nihilo, creates a soul from nothing. No one ever engaged, because they would take the view, well, if you create a soul from nothing, then you can destroy it. Then anything that's created can be destroyed. That would be their position. If you can create something, you can destroy it. Then your soul's not eternal then. So he says that it doesn't even engage it. On the contrary, son, in the beginning, this world was simply the Sat, the one only, without a second. And it thought to itself, let me become many, let me propagate myself. It emitted heat. Anyway, the rest gets a bit, a little bit esoteric. The heat thought to itself, let me become many. So this is a bit like Sankhya, where you get the evolutes. You get Prakriti, and then you get the Buddhi, the intelligence, and then you get Ahankara, and then you get the subtle elements, and then you get, this is a very early, I won't say it is Sankhya, but it's a very early sort of expression of that type of thinking where one thing evolves from another thing. And the heat thought to say, let me become many, let me propagate myself. It emitted waters. It's kind of we can say a proto-Sankhya. Proto means a very, very early underdeveloped, barely, just a glimpse at some early form of what later becomes a systematic philosophy. So whatever it is hot, therefore a man surely perspires, and so on. Okay, we don't want to get into this because we want to focus on things that, okay, here's the famous Tattvamasi, possibly the most famous passages in the Upanishad, and very Advaita friendly. Okay, Advaita non-dual. I want to be able to use these terms, and again, if we want to do a workshop on Vedanta, then I don't want to get into it now, the differences in too great detail, but Advaita means non-dual, right? There's only Brahman. And when the soul becomes enlightened, it's like that drop of water. When it hits the ocean, it's not a drop of water anymore. It's not that it ceases to exist. It just merges into the ocean, right? So that's Advaita. No, duo, twu, two, two. There's all Advaita. And in the Western philosophical tradition, that's called monism. So non-dualism, monism is really the same thing, because something's mono, but it's non-dual then, isn't it? And if something's non-dual, well, it's mono. They call it monism. They call it, non-dualism in the Sanskrit traditions, but Western philosophy calls it monism, but know them to be the same. The other traditions have some element of dualism. They still might say, well, everything is God, but within that oneness, there is distinction. These are the kinds of things we would discuss if we did a workshop on the Upanishads. But the following passages are very Advaita friendly. Shankara likes them. And they're repetitive. And here we go. Now, right, notice, okay, see here, in exactly the same way, that refrain is repeated 6 or 7 times. So what's going to change? We're familiar with this now, this kind of Upanishadic pedagogic style. You change the first bit, and then the refrain is the same. And we know now why this is so. Why is there this repetition? Because it's oral transmission, my friends. It's not written. If you miss it, can't go and flick back like you do with a book and say, what was that again? Let me go back and check it. No, oral transmission, you get it or you don't. You miss it, it's gone. So that's why you repeat it 3, 4, 5 times. And then just so as not to make it boring, you just change the metaphor, but the refrain, the main teaching remains the same. I know I've said this before, but it's just like asana. You do it again and again and again, and eventually it sinks in. Unless you're me, and when it never sinks in. Now take the bees, son. They prepare the honey by gathering nectar from a variety of trees and by reducing that nectar to a homogeneous whole. So this is Advaita friendly. Atman merges into Brahman. The nectar of the different trees, when they go back to the hive, it merges, right? In that state, the nectar from each tree is not able to differentiate. I'm the nectar of that tree. I am the nectar of this tree. So this is monism. When nectar comes back into the hive, it all merges into the one homogeneous honey. And then here's the refrain. In exactly the same way, son, when all these creatures merge into the existent, remember the existent is a synonym of Brahman, Sat. When the creatures merge into the Sat, they're not aware that we are merging into the Sat. No matter what they are in the world, whether it's a tiger, a lion, a wolf, a boar, a worm, a moth, a gnat, or a mosquito, all of these Atmans, they might have be embodied in different forms. They all merge into that Brahman, very monistic. And here's the famous passage. The finest essence here, the finest essence. Lots of essences, right? Things have essences. The air has an essence, fire has an essence, water has an essence, mind has an essence, right? Inherent nature. An essence means an inherent nature that defines it. An essence of something is something that distinguishes it from anything else. It's its essence. Otherwise, there'd be no difference between one thing and another. Things have their inherent natures, essences. So that what's the finest essence of all? Finest. Atman. And it has and what's its essence? Satchidananda. Its essence is, it has the quality of consciousness and ongoingness. Sat. So the finest essence here, that constitutes the Atman of this whole, the self of this whole world. That is the truth. That is the Atman. That's how you are, Svetaketu. That's who you really are, you proud Brahmin boy. What you really are is this Atman. Now, finally, he's got a little bit humble now. He won't learn from a Kshatriya. He won't learn from the warrior, that 2-bit, what do you call him? A 2-bit warrior. That 2-bit prince, he called him. That's how you are, Svetaketu. Sir, teach me more. Very well, son. And now he's going to say the same teaching, just change the metaphor. Now take these rivers, son. The easterly ones flow towards the east. The westerly ones flow towards the west. From the ocean, they merge into the very ocean. They just become the ocean. In that state, when they get to the ocean, they're not aware that, well, I'm the Ganga, or I'm the Thames, I am that river, I am this river. No, they merge in the ocean in exactly the same way, son. When all of these creatures reach the existent, right, when they can become enlightened eventually, they're not aware that we are reaching the existent. They just merge and not aware of anything. No matter what they are in this world, whether it's and here's the same. Whether it's a tiger, a lion, a wolf, a boar, a worm, a moth, a gnat, or a mosquito, they all merge into that. Again, the same refrain. That finest essence, the finest essence here, that constitutes the self of this whole world. That is the truth. That is the self. That's how you are, Svetaketu. Sir, teach me more. This is a good student. Now he's a good student. He's all right with his dad, his Brahmin dad. But this is a student. You just want to, you never get tired of it. When you have this is what Svadhyaya, my friends. Svadhyaya. You just can never get tired of studying the sacred text. It just nourishes your heart, your intellect. And it's your social life. It's your social life. People talk about Sangha, right? Association of yogis. It's important. But association is also the text. You're associating with the great minds. So now third one. Now slightly different point here. Refrain's going to be the same, but slightly different. And it's Jnana Yoga. It's about the Atman. So the larger picture, it's same thing. It's teaching about the Atman, but slightly different point is being made. Now take this huge tree here, son, a banyan. If someone were to hack it at the bottom, its living sap would flow. Likewise, if someone were to hack it at the middle, its living sap would flow. And if someone were to hack it at the top, its living sap would flow. Right? So what's a metaphor for consciousness? You cut your leg, you're conscious of it. You cut your hand, conscious of it. Cut your ear, wherever you cut, conscious. So same with the sap. Pervaded by the jiva, the living essence, the jiva Atman. He's translating it as living essence. I'm not sure if that's a great translation, but the Sanskrit is jiva Atman. Okay, jiva and Atman mean the same thing, except jiva always means the Atman in a body. So Atman and Purusha mean the same thing. Patanjali calls it a siya, drashtra, lots of other words. But when you want to be a little bit more specific, you don't just want to talk about an Atman, but you want to talk about an embodied Atman, then you use the term jiva. It is the same Atman, it's synonymous, but jiva is always going to be in a body, whereas an Atman could be a liberated Atman, could be an Atman in Brahman, merged into Brahman. Jiva is always an embodied Atman. So pervaded by the jiva Atman, this tree stands here, ceaselessly drinking water and flourishing. Now, when, however, life leaves one of its branches, that branch withers away. What's the metaphor? If you lose consciousness in in your limb, consciousness no longer flowing into your limb, you lose consciousness of your limb. Right? People have that. People, I don't know if there's a medical term for it. It's not paralysis, but you can lose, you lose consciousness, become numb. So when life leaves one of its branches, the branch withers away. When it leaves a second branch, that likewise withers away. But the tree can still live. You can lose consciousness in a hand, but still live. You can lose consciousness in two hands and still live. When it leaves a third branch, it also withers away. But when it leaves the entire tree, well, that's death then. The whole tree withers away. It's a slightly different teaching. This teaching is not talking about the union of the Atman with Brahman, as the honey, the nectar merges into the homogeneous honey in the hive, number one, and the rivers merging into the ocean, number two. This third one is the teaching is that consciousness pervades the whole body, just like sap pervades the tree. And as long as it's pervading, we have a normal functioning body. But it's possible that consciousness ceases to, flow into a particular limb. Don't they call that ghost limb or something? Or actually, ghost limb is when you actually get amputated, and you still feel that limb. Yoga would say that your psychic body is still there. Your subtle body is still in that place. So you still feel like you have a limb. This is actually a very interesting phenomena. I know some scientists who are studying this with a yogic sort of point of view in mind. They're proper scientists, and they're looking at this with the possibility of sort of connecting it to a subtle body. Obviously, mainstream science is not ready to hear talk about subtle bodies, but this could be an interesting sort of area here. How do you explain phantom limbs? Well, yoga would say you have a psychic body. And when you're born, you have a psychic body. Now, should you have an accident and you amputate one of your limbs, your psychic body isn't amputated thereby. And so therefore, prana is still flowing around the psychic body, and it's still flowing in that part of the psychic body that's been amputated. Let's say it's an arm. Well, the psychic body still has that arm. It was in the Satyakama, it says it has the shape of the body. If you have a dog, that psychic body take the contours of a dog. Otherwise, the dog wouldn't be conscious. So when you die, your psychic body molds itself into the gross physical body. So if any of those bodies has a limb amputated, the psychic body is still there. So that would be something interesting to, where kind of modern science and perhaps yoga, early days yet, but maybe down the road. Actually, all the books I told you, I gave my whole collection, 5,000 books. I'm actually giving it to the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which is precisely an institute of academics and PhDs in science who take yoga philosophy and physiology seriously. So I wanted to give I wasn't going to give it to a university library. They got tons of books. I wanted to give it to a library where these kinds of conversations are taking place. Okay, on we go. So but when it leaves the entire tree, at some point you can amputate one limb, two limbs. At some point, that's finished, right? You die. So then the whole tree withers away, and then the refrain is the same. In exactly the same way, you continued. Know that this, of course, the body, of course, dies when it's bereft of jiva, the life, the consciousness, but life itself does not die. Consciousness can never die. You can't. First teachings of the Gita, right, bang, right, middle. Gita starts chapter 2, verse 7. First teaching. Never was there a time when you did not exist, nor I did not exist, Arjuna, says Krishna, nor all these kings on the battlefield, nor will there ever be a time when we shall not be. First teaching, Jnana Yoga. The soul is eternal. It changes bodies at death. It's just a change of body. The soul is eternal, can't be killed, can't be burnt, can't be wetted. First teaching. First day in yoga school. You remember the Gurukul? 5 years old, off you go, trot off to the guru. First, okay, boys and girls, sit down for lesson number 1. The Atman is eternal, right? First lesson. You go home, oh, little Svetaketu, what did you learn today, my son? Oh, the Atman is eternal, Dad. The first lesson of Jnana Yoga, Atman is eternal. And then the refrain. Got dust all over the place, because you imagine 5,000 books sitting there for 20 years, some of them untouched. Imagine that much dust. The finest essence here, that constitutes the self of this whole world. That is the truth. Sat. That is the Atman, and that's how you are, Svetaketu. Sir, teach me more. Very well, son. He's been a good Jnani now, good Jnana student. Okay, different teaching, same refrain, slightly different point. Bring a banyan fruit. Here it is, sir. Cut it up. I've cut it up, sir. What do you see there? These quite tiny seeds, sir. I don't know why it says sir. And do you even call your dad sir? I wonder, well, you know what? It's an honorific. I'll look at the Sanskrit, but it'd be like Bhavan. I'm going to guess. And now take one of them and cut it up. I've cut one up, sir. What do you see there? Nothing, sir. Right? So there's a banyan fruit. Think of a pomegranate. Loads of seeds. Now, cut one up. What's in it? Nothing. Then he told him, this finest essence here, son, that you can't even see, right? You plant that, you can't see it, but if you plant that, you get a banyan tree. So this finest essence here, son, that you can't even see, the Atman you can't see, look how on account of this finest essence, this huge banyan tree stands here. Says, can you see it? And he's trying to give him a little empirical, in a sense, it's a kind of a little empirical illustration. He says, look, bring me a banyan fruit, right? Cut it up, lots of seeds. And remember, any one of those seeds can become a banyan tree. Cut it up. Can you see the life force in it? No, I've cut it up. So what do you see there? Nothing. But you see nothing. But that seed produces a huge banyan tree. So there's got to be something there. Can't be nothing, remember? So this finest essence here, son, that you can't even see, look how on account of that finest essence, this huge banyan tree stands here. Believe me, my son, the finest essence, remember the Atman, the Atman, that constitutes the self of this whole world. Brahman is the support. Remember, second sutra of Vedanta, Janmadya Syayataha, Brahman is that which supports the universe, from which the universe emanates. That is the truth. That's the Satyam. That's the self, Atman. That's who you and I are, ladies and gentlemen. If he was sitting there, he would say to us, that's how you all are. This is the Upanishads that we're interested in. We're not interested in the ritualistic part of the Upanishads or the gender issues of the Upanishads, clearly, reflecting a world 3,000 years ago. We're not interested in that. If you're a historian, you are. Not if you're a yogi. This is what you want. You want knowledge about the deep level self. That has nothing to do with gender, nothing to do with race, nothing to do with caste, nothing to do with social anything. Sir, teach me more. Very well, son. Put this chunk of water, okay, again, a different, no, actually quite similar to that. Put this chunk of salt in a container of water and come back tomorrow. The son did as he was told. And the father said to him, The chunk of salt you put in the water last evening, bring it here. He groped for it, but he couldn't find it. It dissolved completely. Now, take a sip from this corner, said the father. How does it taste? Salty. Take a sip from the center. How does it taste? Salty. Take a sip from that corner. How does it taste? Salty. You know, we could actually call this proto-empiricism. We could call this proto-science, like early experimentation, you know, not obviously, but in a sort of, remember, in a forest, they don't have science labs, you know. They're in the forest. Well, they got pomegranates. They got banyan tree seeds. So this is kind of, in a sense, it's empirical, in some sort of way. Take a sip from the corner. How's it? Salty. Center, salty. From that corner, how does it taste? Salty. Throw it out and come back later. Svetaketu did as he was told and found that the salt was always there. The father told him, "You, of course, did not see it there, son. Yet it was always right there." So what's the teaching? The water is one thing, the salt is another, distinct. The salt enters the water in, one point, but immediately pervades the entire water. Once it's pervaded the water, you can't separate it. So consciousness enters the bodies at birth, pervades the body, and then that's it. It pervades the entire body until death. And our consciousness is it circulates around the entire body. They say that it starts in the heart, that it's located in the heart. Its point of origin is the heart. So you didn't see it though, but you know it's there. You can taste it. You can taste it salty. Well, we know consciousness is there because we're conscious. Because we're right now, you're conscious of this Upanishad. So one thing we all know, like Descartes said, one thing I know for sure, cogito ergo sum. I know I'm having these thoughts. Well, one thing we know for sure is that we're conscious. That finest essence here, that constitutes the self of this whole world. That is the truth. That is the self. That's how you are, Svetaketu. Now, take, for example, okay, here's the guru, I think. Yeah. Take, for example, son, here's now a completely different teaching about the need of a guru. Take, for example, son of man, who was brought here blindfolded from the land of Gandhara. Gandhara, do you know what that is? Gandhara, modern day Afghanistan, Kandahar. That word Kandahar, which is the north of Afghanistan, that's an ancient name that goes back to the Vedic texts where with that same name with a G, but it's a guttural, Gandhara. And in the Mahabharata war, the mother of the Kurus, her name was Gandhari because she came from Gandhara, the kingdom of Gandhara. And it's a fascinating place because, do you know, Afghanistan has probably got one of the richest archaeological cultures in the world. There were Greek kingdoms there, an entire Greek civilization there. Before Alexander actually came and slaughtered some of those his own Greeks, because they sided with Darius, the Persian, against his father. So even though they were Greeks, he slaughtered them. There was an Indo-Greek culture, my friends. Fascinating. That was the first East-West. You want East-West? There was the East-West. There was the Greek kingdoms in Kandahar, and it's full of stuff there. And no, you can't go near it because it's all mined. It's all, because the war with the Russians. And then, Afghanistan just been one series of just calamities after another. But at some point, that country ever becomes stable, that's going to be one of the richest archaeological cultures in the world. Because of and it's also on the trading routes from China all the way to Europe. You can't imagine what. Go to the Met or one of the big museums and look at the Gandhara and see if they have a Gandhara section. That's Indo-Greek. And what does that mean? It means you have Indian themes, but in the Western kind of Greco-Renaissance. Well, Renaissance was much later, but that Greco kind of realistic, that Greco, art, because the Renaissance tries to Renaissance it, bring it back. But that sort of, that sort of statuary that's associated with Greek and later gets absorbed in the Roman world, you find that type of art for Indra and the Buddha and Vishnu. It's fantastic. There's the first East-West melange. And then after Alexander, Europe has no connection with India until the first Portuguese found a way around the Africa, because the trade, because Islam emerges and Islam controls all the trade routes, controls the silk routes, and Europeans had to deal with Islam, so they had no connection for 1,500 years. After Alexander, there was no connection between Europe and India until the early Portuguese tradespeople in the 16th century. There were changes of navigation, and everything had to go through the Middle East, which was all controlled by the Arabs. So really interesting. So okay, all of that because of Gandhara. I hope you enjoy these little excursions. Is that all right if we do these little excursions? Right? Aren't they cool? Yeah, hopefully they're all right. So now, a man who was brought here blindfolded, right? Obviously, is a metaphor for avidya, ignorance. Okay, so keep that in mind. So a person, his eyes are blind. Okay, so take, for example, son, a man who was brought here blindfolded from the land of Gandhara, means way up there in the northwest, and then left in a deserted region. As he was brought blindfolded and left there blindfolded, this is us in samsara, my friends, without a guide. We're brought into our bodies and brought into samsara, and we're left blindfolded. And he's blind. He will drift about here and there towards the east or the north or the south. There we are. Here we are in the world, drifting about, chasing this desire, chasing that desire, completely blind as to our real Atman. Isn't it beautiful? So there he is, drifting about. Now, if someone were to free him from his blindfold and tell him, go that way, the land of Gandhara is that way. In other words, someone were to tell us, you're an Atman. This is who you are. This is where you came from. This is what you really are. Take off take off the blindfold, meaning the teacher gives us vidya, not to remove the avidya. Patanjali calls it viveka. Viveka kyatir, right? Why do you do the 8 limbs of yoga? Yoganga 2:28. Yoganga anushtana. What do you get from anushtana? What do you get from following the yoganga? Ashudikshaye, fine, remove impurities. Jnana Dipti, light of knowledge, all the way up to Viveka Kyatir. So that's knowledge. So if someone were to free him from his blindfold and tell him, go that way, the land of Gandhara is in that direction, being a learned and wise man, he would go, right, follow the instructions of the teacher. He would go from village to village, asking for directions, and finally arrive in the land of Gandharva. In exactly the same way, in this world, when a man has a teacher, and remember, Patanjali is our teacher, Upanishads are our teacher. You don't have to go running around looking for a human teacher, my friends, because then you just get cheated. 90% chance you get cheated, trust me. I've been in the game for 45 years. Don't go running around looking for a guru. Just accept the text as your guru. Accept Ishvara as your guru. Patanjali, so what does Patanjali say about Ishvara? Guru Purvesham. Kala Navacheda, he's the guru. So let surrender to Ishvara, surrender to Bhagavan, and be peaceful with that. And then if Bhagavan makes the arrangement that you meet somebody, fine. But don't go running around thinking I got to get a guru again, because then you're functioning at your ego. If you're looking, what are you looking for a guru with, my friends? Your mind. And what is your mind? Afflicted. The mind is afflicted. So therefore, you're going to look for a guru with an afflicted mind. What are you going to get? An afflicted guru. How else could it be? We're walking around in ignorance. I got to have a guru, And you're looking around with a lens. You're going to find somebody that fits your avidya lens. And then you wonder, you get cheated. It's better you surrender to Ishvara and let Ishvara make that arrangement, because then it's not coming from your ego, my friends. If you don't mind me making a point, because I've seen so much nonsense, really, I have a very strong, we can't deny the fact that the texts talk that you need a guru. We're not going to rewrite the text right here. In exactly the same way in this world, when a man has a teacher, he knows there is a delay for me here only until I'm freed. I have to remain in this world until liberation, but then I'll arrive. If you have a proper teacher and you follow those instructions, you get there. Maybe not this life. You get there. So we can't deny that the guru is an inherent part of all Vaidika traditions. But what my point is not, don't take a teacher. My point is, don't go running around looking for a teacher through your egoistic lens, because you won't recognize the teacher. You only recognize what your lens of a mind will allow you to recognize. So what then? What do you do then? Surrender to Ishvara. And let Ishvara make those arrangements. You just say to Ishvara, if Bhagavan, if I need to have a guru, you make that arrangement. I'm not going to go running around and just get all in the mental state. Oh, and I've got to find a guru. Because the more you think like that, the more you're just going to grab at anything that moves. With a long beard, white beard, and a saffron. But anyone with dreadlocks. All right. I'm sincerely want to share that with you, my friends. My first guru turned out to be a pedophile. So I'm talking from a place of deep scar. All right. And I don't want any of you to sort of, we cannot change the text. They do talk about guru, but don't go running around in some panic, trying to find a guru through your afflicted, klishta mind. No, surrender to Ishvara. And you just say, Ishvara, if I need a guru, let Ishvara make the arrangement, my friends. Ishvara is going to make Yogakshema Vahamya Aham. Krishna says, I'll make all arrangements. You just surrender to me. All right. Did anyone? I'm really want to make that point, my friends. I don't, so many people have been surrender the prime of their lives. The story repeats itself again and again and again. They move into ashrams, they surrender to gurus at 10, 15, 20 years, and then they find out some awful scandal. And then the danger then is, not only do you reject the teacher, you reject the whole system. You identify the system with the teacher, and you say, oh, then the whole system is corrupt. So please consider what I'm saying. And seriously, don't go running around looking for a guru. So, one more time, surrender to Ishvara, Bhagavan. If you have a theistic, a theist possibility, a theistic samskara, and let Ishvara take care of that. But again, we can't change the fact that the texts do talk about the guru. And here's an example. In exactly the same way, in this world, when a man is a teacher, he knows there's a delay for me here in the world, only until I'm freed, moksha. But then I will arrive. Even if we struggle, we have our old habits come and haunt us. We have our little fall downs. But if we're sincerely trying to follow that path, my friends, we can be sure, maybe not this life, it will happen. If we follow the traditions with that face. So here we go. The finest essence here, that constitutes the self of this whole world. That is the truth. That is the self, right? That's how you are. Famous line, Tat Tvamasi, Svetaketu, always on our midterm exam, Russell's Introduction to Philosophy. We always put this one on, Tat Tvamasi, and everybody gets it right. It's like a freebie. Okay, so there we are, and then it goes off a little bit, and then it gets a bit esoteric. We're not going to worry about that. I want to read this lovely story with you, my friends, of Indra and Virochana. See, then it's just a lovely sort of, it's a great story, captures the mind. And where are we? 8-7. And then we're done with the Chandogya. We have a lot of, I'm willing to do another couple of sessions, because that the Mundaka is my favorite, and then the Kata, and we got to, we want to get a good sense of the Upanishads. So you'll have to let me know if you want a couple more sessions, all right? So just so that, email me, but don't ask, I get so many emails. Please don't, if you have a real serious question, I'll answer it, but don't, just say, yes, I want to do more. All right, 8-7, the self. Okay. Right, ready? This is a long story, my friends, but we got 45 minutes. The Atman. Now remember, Atman just means self. Now, normally it means the deep level, Satchidananda self, the conscious non-material self. But just like the word self in English, the self could mean your body self. Could be in your mind self. Or it could be your soul self. Even the very word self in English kind of has that possibility. Well, Atman has that too. Now, normally when we're reading yoga texts and Sankhya texts, then Atman's always going to mean that deep level, Satchit, another non-material self. But in the Upanishads, it can, and even the Gita, sometimes it means the mind, and sometimes it's just kind of left hanging. Sometimes it means the body, sometimes it's left dangling. So here it's left dangling. Now, this Atman that is free from evils, right? Because the karma and dharma and adharma and evil afflicts the body and the mind. It's the mind, not the Atman. No evil in the mind. The mind is pure Sat, Chid, Ananda. Any evil or good, for that matter, is a karmic, is samskara, which is located in the chitta, the psychic body. So that Atman, which is free from evils, that's not the body Atman, not the mind Atman, because though they could be evil. No, the one that's free from evil, free from old age and death. Clearly, that's not the body Atman. Free from sorrow. Well, that's a mental state, so clearly not the mental Atman, right? Starts off not that one which is the body, because the body suffers old age and death. Not that one which is the mind, because the mind experiences sorrow, which is free from hunger and thirst. Back to the body again. That self whose desires and intentions are real. This is very interesting for reasons I don't want to get into now. That is the self you should try to discover. The eternal, immortal self, not the body-mind self. That is the self you should seek to perceive. Perception. Drashtu sarupe vastanam. Sutra 3. What's the drashtra? The perceiver, the seer. Sutra 3, Patanjali. Perception. You can perceive the self. That is the self you should seek to perceive. Now, pay attention to this. When someone discovers that self and perceives it, he obtains all the worlds and all his desires are fulfilled. So said Prajapati, the teacher. Okay, so if you realize you're Atman, you've realized Brahman, and Brahman's everything. So you've obtained all the worlds. You don't need to do the Vedic ritualism like the Vedic ritualists to attain the higher realms. No. Once you attain Brahman, Brahman is everything, and all your desires are fulfilled. You're not going to go chasing around petty desires. You're Satchit Ananda. You're in pure Ananda, pure bliss. After all, desires. When we chase desires, we seek some kind of little type of bliss, don't we? Some temporary little Kodak moment of bliss. So, but so he's talking about the Atman. But okay, here's let me give you a heads up. So he's talking to two. The king of the celestials and the king of the demons. The king of the celestials is Indra, just like Zeus. He's a rain god. He has thunderbolts, just like Thor. Because remember, the Indo-European languages are connected, but there was also an ancient Indo-European culture. It was connected, not just linguistically, religiously. That's how you get the fire sacrifice that we mentioned, but the Greeks and Romans had that. Of course, it was a kind of a bit of a ghastly compared to Vedic ritualism. It was much more tamasic, right? You cut open a bull and pull out the entrails, and you read the entrail, a very tamasic form, but nonetheless ritual involving a fire sacrifice. So therefore, the deities, the celestials, are actually cognate in the Indo-European language family. We see Thor, a rain god. We see Zeus, the kind of thunder and lightning, and we see Indra. Okay, so Indra is listening to this. And Prajapati is a kind of a progenitor. Let's just say he's a great rishi. He's saying, when you discover your Atman, he's obviously talking like a Vedāntic. He's talking about the Atman. He's talking about when you realize your Atman, you don't want anything else. You're fully fulfilled. Now you know everything. That's what he's saying. But they're hearing something else. They're hearing, oh, if you know this Atman, you'll attain the worlds. They're thinking, oh, because the gods and the demons are always fighting for control over the universe, right? This is in all the so many ancient mythologies, the Suras and the Asuras, the light and the dark, whatever you want, even Star Wars. Star Wars is epic. And actually, it takes from some of these ancient... so they're not realizing he's talking about the Atman. If you realize the Atman, then you attain all the worlds in the sense that you become Brahman, and then Brahman is everything. They're not understanding it that way. They're taking it literally. Oh, we'll get to dominate the world. They both want to dominate because one's the chief of the gods, one's the chief of the demons. Okay, you clear? Yes? All good? Right. Both the gods and the demons became aware of this, and each side talked it over. They take Prajapati seriously. He's a powerful progenitor of. Come, let's discover this Atman. They have no idea what he's talking about. Remember, Atman means self. Let's discover the Atman, by discovering which one obtains all the worlds and all one's desires are fulfilled. Come on, lads, let's get this Atman, and then we'll govern the world. That's what they're thinking. So then Indra set out from among the gods, and Virochana came from among the demons. Going there independently to Prajapati, the two arrived in the presence of Prajapati, carrying firewood in their hands. We know what it means when you carry firewood in the hands. What do we say? You go to initiation, you approach the guru, and you want initiation. So you're giving firewood for the sacred fire. So they both go independently. Listen to this. They lived the life of brahmacharis for 32 years. He won't even talk to them. Right? 32. Right, the teacher's seeing how sincere you are. 32 years, celibate, and then we'll talk to you. Then, after 32 years, Prajapati asks him, why have you, can you imagine that? He just 32 years and he says, oh, yes, can I help you? Why have you come? Why have you lived here? What do you want? Imagine that, what kind of a teacher is that? My goodness, is a very serious teacher. They replied, sir, people report these words of yours, right? They quote what he said. The Atman, that is free from evils, free from old age and death, free from sorrow, free from hunger and thirst, right? They're repeating verbatim what we read above, whose desires and intentions are real. That is the self that you should try to discover. That is the self you should seek to perceive, right? They don't care about all that. Here's what they care about. When someone discovers that self and perceives it, he obtains all the worlds. That's what they want. They want, because as I said, the gods and the Suras and the Asuras are battling for control of the higher realms. Okay, all is desire. This is an Atma teaching, my friend. It's an Atma teaching. Hang in there. We're going to get to we're going to get to a kind of a grand finale. But this is embedded in this sort of frame narrative. All his desires are fulfilled. So you've lived here seeking the self after 32 years. Okay, so you've lived here seeking the self. Prajapati then told them, this person that one sees here in the eye, right? Because if you look in someone's eye, you see your reflection. We could say a mirror, right? Right. If you look in someone's eye, you'll see yourself in the eye. So this person one sees here in the eye, that is the self. That is the immortal. He's testing them. That is the one free from fear. That is Brahman. But then, sir, who is the one seen here in the water and here in the mirror? That's the same one, right? You see it in the eye reflected. You see it in the water reflected. In other words, the body. It's the body. You see the body reflected in water. The body's reflected in the mirror. The body's reflected in someone's. So he's saying, so they say, who is this Atman? By knowing which we will attain control of the world. He says, it's the body, the one you see in the reflected water. It's the same one who is seen in all these surfaces, replied Prajapati. Look at yourselves in a pan of water and let me know if there is anything you do not perceive about yourself. So they looked into a pan of water, then they looked in a mirror. Prajapati asked them, what do you see? And they replied, sir, we see our entire body, which is also Atman, remember. Atman can go three ways. It can mean the deep level Atman, the deep level consciousness. It can mean the mental, subtle, psychic body, the Linga Sharira, so many names for it. Or it can mean the pure consciousness body. But so we see here our body, a perfect likeness down to the very hairs of the body, down to the very nails. You're looking in the mirror, right? Looking in the water. Prajapati told them, adorn yourselves beautifully, dress well, spruce yourself up, and then look into a pan of water. So they adorned themselves beautifully, dressed well, spruced themselves up, and then looked into a pan of water. Prajapati asked them, what do you see? And they replied, sir, the two of us are beautifully adorned, well-dressed, all spruced up in exactly the same way, sir. These reflections, sir, beautifully adorned, well-dressed, are all spruced up. That is the self, says Prajapati. That is the immortal. That is the one free from fear. That is Brahman, Prajapati told them. All right? In other words, it's your body. that you see reflected in whatever, a mirror, water, or the eye. And the two of them left with contented hearts. Seeing the two, he's testing them. Guru's testing them. Are they sincere? Seeing the two depart, Prajapati observed, there they go, without learning about the Atman, without discovering the self. The side that will hold to this Upanishad, whether it is the good, the gods or the demon, is bound to be vanquished. The side that holds onto a materialistic notion of the self, the side that thinks that I am the body, they'll get vanquished, whoever it is. So he's kind of dismissive. Oh, I tested them and they failed. They failed the test. What did they? Now Virochana, the king of the demons, his heart totally content, went back to the demons and announced to them this Upanishad, the teaching. It's the body that one should extol in the world. It's the body that one should care for. When someone extols the body alone in the world, when he cares only for the body, he wins both this world and the next. So this is a materialist. They're not quite the same materialists as we are, because materialism in our day and age means that when you die, that's it. So when we use the term materialist in philosophy, you may say physicalist. Now they have a new term, sensationist, meaning all it is sensation. It's just physics. It's just physics. That's right. There's no soul. There's no Atman. In other words, consciousness is an epiphenomenon of matter. That position in the philosophy of religion is called a materialist, or materialism, or physicalism, or sensationism. Now, so he says, okay, but the materialists back then were not quite the same. At least some materialists were like that, but other materialists actually believed in an Atman, but they just wanted material things in this world, and they wanted a better material birth in the next. So they were materialists in that sort of sense. They accepted that consciousness was distinct from matter. So they're not the same as how we would use the term today. A materialist today does not accept consciousness as distinct from matter. A materialist today would say consciousness is matter. It's some epiphenomenon of neurons, some combination of neurons, and you know, all right. But there were materialists back then that actually did believe that something survives death, but they weren't interested in liberating it. They just wanted to go to a celestial realm and have a better karma, right? So it's the body that one should extol in this world. All right. When he cares only for the body, he wins both this world and the next. So this is what materialists back then thought. Therefore, even today, people here say of a man who gives no. Okay, forget that. So this is the king of the demons. Goes back to the demons. Says, "Hey lads, I got the teachings. It's the Atman. We need to worship the body, and we will win the world." And he never goes back to the teacher. Satisfied. Failed the test. Indra, on the other hand, even before he reached the gods, saw this danger. He said, hang on, there's a problem here with this teaching. If this is the self, the one that's reflected in the water and in the mirror, then just as it becomes beautifully adorned when the body is beautifully adorned, it becomes well-dressed when the body is well-dressed, and spruced up when the body is spruced, just as this bodily self looks nice when I decorate it, but in exactly the same way, it's bound to become blind when the body becomes blind, lame when the body becomes lame, crippled when the body becomes crippled, and upon the death of the body, it too is bound to die. I see nothing worthwhile in this. He realizes he's not a materialist. He realizes, hang on, there's a problem saying the self is the body. If the self is the body, then it dies at death. It gets old. It gets maimed. So he returned again. The guru tested him, passed the first test, carrying firewood in his hands. Remember, that's how you get it. He wants more knowledge. Prajapati said to him, this is another name for Indra, Bhagavan, didn't you lead together with Virochana, the demon, with contented hearts? So why have you come back? What do you want? Right? So Indra replied, if this self, then, sir, the body self, and he repeats what he just says. Just as it becomes right, it becomes lame, it becomes blind. Upon the death of the body, it is bound to die. I see nothing worthwhile in this. So Prajapati says, okay, now I have maybe this guy's serious. So we told him, it's exactly as you say, Bhagavan, well done. I'll explain it to you further. Stay for another 32 years. God, this is 64 years. 64 years. And we're so impatient. Oh my God. All right. So he lived there another 32 years, after which Prajapati spoke to him. Okay, the one who goes happily in a dream. Now remember, there's 4 states of consciousness. We're going to read that Upanishad, the Mandukya. There's the waking consciousness, dream consciousness, deep sleep consciousness, and the 4th, Turiya. That's the one Patanjali talks about, Sarupe Vasthanam, Nirbija Samadhi. So now we're on the 2nd level. So he goes, he's testing him again. I'm just giving you a heads up. It's going to be 3 tests. And then finally makes it. By that time, he's 99. He's walking around with a walking stick and white hair. So the one who goes happily about in a dream, that's the self. That's the immortal. That's the one free from here. That is Brahman. So Indra left 2nd time, his heart content. But even before he had reached the gods, remember, he's got to go back. Virochana went back and told the demons. Indra's supposed to go back and tell the gods. But before he reached the gods, he saw this danger. Like the first time he saw the danger, well, if I'm the body, anything happens to the body, that happens to the self. I don't want that. I want eternality and bliss and so forth. But he saw this danger. It is true that this self, okay, fair enough, it doesn't become blind like the body does. It's true this self, the dream self, does not become blind when the body becomes blind. And this dream self does not become lame when the body becomes lame. This self is clearly unaffected by the faults of the body. It's not killed when the body is slain or rendered lame when this body becomes lame. Nevertheless, people do in a way kill it and chase after it in dreams. It does in a way experience unpleasant things. And in a way, it even cries. You can have a nightmare, you can have a bad dream. I see nothing worthwhile in this. He doesn't want that kind of a self. So he returned again, carrying firewood in his hands. Prajapati said to him, Bhagavan, didn't you leave with a contented heart? So why have you come back? What do you want? He replied, he's a tough teacher, isn't he? My goodness. He replied, it is true, sir, that this self does not become blind, and he repeats the whole thing. Nevertheless, people do in a way kill it, right, in dreams. You can get, you can have a nightmare, get somebody's killing you, and they do in a way chase it, I see nothing worthwhile in this. It's not what I'm looking for. He's a seeker. Prajapati told him, it's exactly as you say, Bhagavan. I'll explain it to you further. Stay another 32 years. Oh, what's that? 96 years. 96 years, my friends. How many white hairs are you going to have? 96 years. So we lived another 32 years. So the point is what, my friends? We have to be serious if we seek truth. You don't want to have a guru just kind of like some trendy little thing, some trendy little sort of, West Coast, oh, I've got a guru. It's serious business. A real gurus are going to test you. They're not going to pat you on the head and flatter you just to give them a donation. Not like that. This is serious business. So he's testing them. Another 32 years. And then what did he say after 32 years? Well, no, not done yet. After which Prajapati spoke to him. When one is fast, this is deep sleep self. Still not the 4th. When one is fast asleep, totally collected and serene, and sees no dreams, that is the self. Right? The deep sleep, what do you call that? Non-REM. That is the immortal. That is the one free from fear. That is Brahman. That sounds a bit better, right? Isn't it nice to have a nice deep sleep and you don't want to wake up in the morning if you're like me? Like, oh, I want to go back to sleep. Right. Indra then left, his heart content. Did you want to have prasad? No. His heart content. But even before he reached the gods, you see how repetitive? But it's interesting, isn't the mind captured? You want to know how it finishes now, don't you? He saw this danger. Hang on a minute, but this self was just explained, this deep sleep self, you see, it doesn't perceive itself fully as I am this. It doesn't even know any of these beings here. It becomes completely annihilated. I see nothing worthwhile in this. Who wants to have a deep sleep? So you don't know anything. You might as well be dead then. There's no consciousness of anything. I see nothing worthwhile in this, he says. So he returned again, carrying firewood in his hands. Prajapati said to him, Bhagavan, didn't you leave with a contented heart? So why have you come back? What do you want? He replied, but sir, this self you just explained doesn't perceive itself, right? What does Patanjali say? Swarupe vastanam, you perceive your own self. Drashtu, asiya, swarupe vastanam, sees its own self, perception. But in deep sleep, you don't do that. I see nothing worthwhile in this. If you were Bhagavan, you'd think, you'd be like, give me my firewood back. I've been 96 years. Can I have my firewood back, please? I want a refund. He replied, but sir, this self is just, okay. So Prajapati told him, it's exactly as you say, Bhagavan, but I will explain it to you further, but only under the following condition. Finally, he relents a bit. Stay here another 5 years. So he lived another 5 years. Altogether, that makes 101 years. And that is why people say, for 101 years, did Bhagavan live as a celibate student with Prajapati. And they're quoting some ancient story that we don't have access to anymore. And now he gives him the real Upanishadic teaching of the Atman, the real self. This body, Bhagavan, is mortal, is in the grip of death. So, but it is the abode of the immortal and non-bodily self. One who has a body is in the grip of joy and sorrow. And there's no freedom from joy and sorrow for one who has a body. Remember Patanjali, the Buddha, sarvam dukkam, it's all frustration if you have a body, my friends, no bliss. No deep level bliss, only sort of momentary, temporary sensation, not what we're seeking. Can't find it through the body. We don't want to believe that. But and hang on, so I don't think we need to go on actually, because then it gets, there's a few, let me see, how does it go on? So we'll just go to the end, and he gives him the proper teachings, and he goes, it is this self that the gods venerate, as a result of which they have obtained all the worlds and had their desires fulfilled. And what he really means by that is when you reach the deep level self, you realize it's oneness in some sort of way with Brahman. And then all your desires are fulfilled. You have no more desires. Why? Because it's such an ananda. The ananda, you're blissful, you don't need anything. If you have full ananda, then you don't need going chasing after some trivial, momentary, sensual or emotional experience. Ananda means, and it's sat. Sat means ongoing ananda, no end. Or our pleasures have adyantavanta kunteya. Krishna said, adyantavanta kunteya nate shuramate buddha. These pleasures and essential pleasures, adi anta, they have a beginning and an end. Nate shuramate buddha. Wise are not interested in that. Nate shuramate. A wise person doesn't enjoy that. Why should I enjoy something that has a beginning and an end? Because even if I'm in the middle of it, I know it's going to end. How can I be satisfied with it when I know it's going to end? So not like that. The Ananta is a sat, ongoing, or eternal. It's an ongoing, doesn't have adi antavanta, doesn't have a beginning and an end. Okay, so that's that's all I wanted to share with you, and we have a fair bit of ground to cover, and let's go on to the next Upanishad. And how much time do we have? We have a few more minutes, and we'll take questions, my friends. And let's push this out of the way so I can, I don't even know how to get this box out of the way. How do I get you out of the way? I can't click on, oh, there we are. So we go to the Taittiriya Upanishad, 10 more minutes, and then we'll take questions. And here the Taittiriya also has that bliss thing. One of you, who was it that emailed me? Julia. Was it Julia? Let me just check my email. Julia, there's true. You remember the bliss to the 10 to the power 14? Do you remember that? But actually, if you do the math, the same story appears in the Brihad and the Aranyaka, and the Taittiriya has a few extra zeros on it. And it doesn't matter. All right, so let's get rid of that. And let's go back to, oh gosh, what did I do with my Taittiriya? There it is. All right. So we just have 10 more minutes, and then I have some questions. All right, the Taittiriya, another old Upanishad, and we don't really need to worry too much about, but there's one verse that I did want to share with you, the one becoming many, because, okay, but we do not find the term Sat Chit Ananda in the Upanishads. It becomes so common, everyone bandies it about, it may be the case. I don't even think Shankara uses it. I asked in the Shankara's 8th, 9th century, well over 1,000 years after the Upanishads. It's not clear that he uses the term Satchidananda. Some later person in the Advaita lineage post Shankara seems to have used it and claimed Shankara used it, but we don't find any reference in Shankara to the term Satchidananda. This is just a philological point in case you're interested. Given how ubiquitous the term Satchidananda, everybody's heard of it. Don't find it in the Upanishads. You don't find it for 1,000 years after. You don't even find it in Shankara. What you do find in the Taittiriya is not Satchidananda, but you find this. Oh, by the way, here, remember Patanjali? What is Ishvara? Tasya vachakaha pranavaha. He's Om. Remember the verse? Goes way back. Brahman is Om. Ishvara is Om. Brahman is Om. The whole world is Om. When one says Om, and then the rest gets a bit weird. But the idea, the correlation of Brahman and Om is very Upanishadic, and it pervades the Upanishads. And there's going to be one whole Upanishad, the Mandukya, which is a short Upanishad. And just as consciousness is divided into 4, waking, dream, deep sleep, and then you know what they call the 4th? They just call it the 4th. The others have names, because we can describe them, because we've experienced them. And if you experience something, it leaves a samskara. And if there's a samskara, it creates a vritti. And if there's a vritti, then you can remember the verbal handle. You can make a verbal handle. You can create a name for it. But if the mind hasn't experienced something, how are you going to name it? It hasn't left an imprint. If it hasn't left an imprint, you can't make a verbal handle. So what do they call it? The 4th. They don't try to make a verbal handle. Let's just call it the 4th. Because if we throw a word at it, we're just projecting some prakritic samskara at it, some material samskara, which is not which we shouldn't be doing, because it's not material. You see, language comes from what? A samskara in the mind. Where does a samskara come from? A contact with a sense and a sense object. So I see the tree, it leaves an imprint in my mind, the samskara, that arises as a vritti. And then I get together with everybody and say, hey, what are we going to call this? And we give it what do they call it? A verbal handle. All right, let's call it a tree. So let's move on to the Taittiriya that I wanted to share with you. And that would be 111. Here it is coming up. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. This is just kind of Dharma. This is not Atma Tattva. This is not Jnana, but this is Dharma. Here's a little bit of Dharma. We'll take a little break from Jnana. After the completion of Vedic study, right? Brahmacharya, 25 years. Okay, these are not people that are going in, that are seeking the Atman. These are professional Brahmins that then become professional ritualist priests, like Satyakama was training to become. So the teacher says, admonishes his resident pupil, speak the truth, Satyam, follow the Dharma. Do not neglect your private recitation of the Veda. You have to recite it every day. You have to do your morning sacrifices. After you've given a valuable gift to the teacher says, after you've given, that's called Guru Dakshin. That's a gift, right? Because you can't charge for education. Can't charge. And Brahmin cannot demand a free. The expectation is he gets a gift, but you can't stipulate what that is. You can say you give a gift. Now that's the Dharma. The Dharma is the teacher should teach, and that's the Dharma of the teacher, and the Dharma of the student is he gives a gift. But but you can't fix a fee or anything like that. So after you've given, okay, he slips in the word valuable there. He says, "Don't a gift, but let's make sure it's a valuable gift." After you've given a valuable gift to the teacher, do not cut off your family line. What do the yogis do? Cut off the family line. They cut off, they go off and seek the Atman. They leave home, they become sadhus, they wander, they're mendicants. You see them in India, walking around with their dreadlocks and their shiva and their tridents. They neglect the family. He said, no. Caste Brahmanism, no. You gotta do your rituals because you have to, because you have to do your rituals to feed the ancestors, actually. It's quite materialistic. Do not cut off your family line. Do not neglect the truth. Do not neglect the law. Do not neglect your health. Do not neglect your wealth. Look at that. Yogis give up everything. Do not neglect your private and public recitation of the Veda. Do not neglect the rights to gods and ants. So it's pious, but materialistic. This is caste Brahmanism. Treat your mother like a god. I bet you like that one. Treat your father like a god. Oh my, yeah. Somebody kindly tell my daughter that, please. Treat your teacher like a god. All right. Treat your guests like gods. Got to feed everybody that comes to your house. Got to feed them. You should perform only those rites that are irreproachable, never other types of rites. You should hold in, right? Don't do black magic types of things. Rites, you should, they had all that. The Atharva Veda, the fourth Veda, is full of black spells. Black magic, how you harm your enemy, how to sort of, how to steal somebody's wife with incantation. It's quite black. All right. So that goes on like this. But here, what I really wanted to share with you, where are we? 12. What verse number is this? 211. Okay, we want to go to 22 to 221. These are beautiful hymns, though. I have proclaimed you, and you alone as the visible Brahman. I have proclaimed you as the right. This is a meter. And this will be chanted. And that sounds really beautiful. I have proclaimed you as the true. It has helped me. It has helped the teacher. Yes, it has helped me. It has helped the teacher. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. There you have your Om Shanti Shanti, way back there. Om, may it help us both together. Om, may it foster us both together. All right. Here, this is the closest you get to Satchidananda. It doesn't say Satchidananda. It says Satyam, Jnanam, and Ananta, not Ananda with a D, but Ananta. So truth is Satya rather than Sat. Knowledge is Jnana, but that's very similar to Chit, because sometimes Jnana is used for consciousness, and Satyam and Sat are very close. And infinite is quite different from Ananda. It sounds the same. Ananta is infinite. Ananda is bliss. But that's a reference to Brahman. A man who knows them is hidden in the deepest cavity. That's in your heart. Hidden in the highest heaven. That's Brahman as the cosmic substructure of everything. Remember, Brahman is kind of the cosmic support, and Atman is the little one in you and I. They're interchangeable. We've discussed that. Sometimes they're used one way or the other, but there is Brahman within us, our Atman, but there's also Brahman that supports and sustains the entire universe. So it's hidden in the deepest cavity, that's the heart, but it's hidden in the highest heaven, that's the sort of cosmic God, that's Brahman as creator. Okay, so that's that. And we did 2 hours, my friends, and I'm done with the Taittiriya. I actually have some guests here who are staying overnight, and they've been working all day, loading up the van, 15-foot truck. I kid you not, a huge collection of Indological books. I've collected for 40 years, running around India, all down little gullies and alleys where there may be a publisher does like 3 little funky little books. And I honestly, and it's so nice to be able to give them to a, you get to an age you have to renounce, my friends. But even if there's Sanskrit books on yoga, it's still an attachment. So it's a beautiful thing, and it's freeing, and especially if you can give it to an institute that's going to really use it in make it available to everybody, including my painting back there. Say goodbye to the painting. Yeah, there's a painting. That's Krishna. It's Krishna Leela, Krishna and the gopis, and then these are. It's kind of it's beautiful. It's a mandala. Look at the colors. But we're negotiating. I'm saying, okay, maybe I'll hang on to it because they haven't finished building the place yet. So I'll keep it for a year or two, and then when you're ready, I'll drive it down. All right, enough waffle. Questions, my friends? Yes.
Edwin, it's Sylvia. I just wanted
Sylvia, we got David first.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, David, and then Sylvia. I'm sorry, then you'll be next. Yeah.
Hi, Sylvia. It's good to see you also, and great to see you, Edwin. My question, I don't know how, if it might sound simple, is those people that were living, trying to find the truth, and they were living for 101 years, like for 32 years, they were ignored. what was their daily routine? I mean, I don't know if you can answer this. What were they doing on the average day that they were there? And then the other thing is, how did Indra communicate with the gods, or what were the gods exactly that Indra was going to give that information that he got?
Well, the first question, David, it depends if you want to take the story literally, that they literally, you could, that was, if they were, then they would be, or you could just take it as a metaphorically, that the point of the story is to teach us that, you know, we have to be prepared to be sincere, and the guru is going to test us, and it's only when we're very, very sincere that the guru will increase the level of knowledge. So you could take it just in that sort of a way. It's not literally 32 years, but if you did want to take it literally, because after all, how do we know? Then what do they do? Well, if you're living in the Gurukula, the house of the Brahmin, you're studying the sacred texts, you're taking bath in the holy river, you're in the forest. There isn't, your whole time is spent in your spiritual practices. So you'll be fasting, you'll be doing tapas, you'll be doing, you know, those kinds of activities, serving the guru. Yeah, this guru Prajapati didn't seem like he was teaching, but normally the guru would be teaching, imparting knowledge, and the disciples are sitting there. And as for the second question, which was help, David. I got
Indira,
anybody
with the gods, communicating with the gods. What were these gods, and how would they communicate with these gods?
I mean, they're, you know, the ancient world, everywhere in the ancient world, Greco-Roman, Babylonian, Mesoamerican, China, Africa, and you have different dimensions in the universe, and which are not perceivable, just like physicists say there's black matter, and you infer its existence, but you can't see it. So there are dimensions that are imperceivable, and they, in the ancient world, and certainly the Vedic world, there were realms, and they had celestials and all kinds of different realms with all kinds of different kinds of creatures. Why? Because your karma has to be fulfilled in an appropriate way. So people that do really, 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 really good work, there's no real body in our realm that can accommodate that sort of good karma. So then they get a celestial body, and a celestial realm doesn't last forever. And likewise, there's lower realms. So we see this in the Greek cultures, in the Latin cultures, in all ancient cultures. They have a sense of the different dimensionality. So Indra then he's the king, the chief celestial. He's not God in a big G sort of way. That's Vishnu. But he's the chief of the celestials, and he communicates, he talks, same as we do in our realm. We talk with physical vocal cords, and physical air is vibrated, and it goes into the physical ear. Everything is more subtle there, but the principle of speech and sight and the senses are functioning just in a much more subtle and sattvic sort of way. But so we would communicate. Remember, he never actually made it back. Virochana went back and spoke and then just stayed with the demons. But Indra's on his way back, and then he thought, hang on a minute, there's a problem here. I see no use in this. And he goes back. So he doesn't actually go back to the gods for 96 years. But I would take the story metaphorically, as, you know, that he's, you know, been tested by the teacher, and he's proved his sincerity, and he's willing to stay for 32 years without getting any instruction. Normally, you live in the house of the guru, you're getting instruction every day. That's part of, exactly to answer your first question, that's what you do. You listen to the teachings. He's not getting any of that. Who knows what he was doing? But he was so sincere that he's willing to do that for 96 years. I think that's the theological message about the intensity of the mokṣa, it's called, the desire for knowledge of liberation. Thank you, David. Sylvia.
Hi, I just wanted to tell you how grateful I am when you told us that we don't need a guru, because for so many years, I thought that I couldn't become self-realized without a guru. That's all I've been reading, is that you need a guru, you need it. And you said, well, Upaniṣad is a teacher, and Ishvara will take care of it. Ishvara is the spirit inside. Is that who
No, Ishvara is God with a big G, but Silver, I didn't say you don't need a guru. What I said was the text all talk about, we do need a guru, but what I said was don't go running around looking, oh, I need a guru, I need a guru. Surrender to Ishvara and let Ishvara make that arrangement that when the time is right and when you are right, you will meet the right person. And let Ishvara make that, because if we go running around looking for a guru, we're imperfect. Our minds are klishta. And therefore, we're going to find the chances are we're going to find someone that is klishta and we're going to be cheated. Whereas if we surrender to Bhagavan and it's not, no one is saying you don't need a guru. We can't. The texts are very clear. You need a guru. We read that passage, the Gandhara. But what I'm suggesting is, yes, in the meantime, the texts are our gurus. Absolutely. The texts are our gurus. But we surrender to Ishvara and we let Ishvara make any kind of external arrangement such that we may meet somebody in this life or next life. Who says when it's going to happen? So who is Ishvara? It depends on your tradition, Sylvia.
Advaita.
Well, then in the Advaita Vedanta, the guru is Ishvara and everything emerges into Brahman. All of the rivers go into the ocean. So when you become enlightened, there's no guru, there's no Ishvara, there's no you, there's no student, there's no teacher. Everything is just merged into one Brahman. So, but Advaita Vedanta has strong emphasis on the guru until you get there.
Oh, okay.
But when you get there, it all dissolves like the rivers. But you still surrender to Ishvara when you're under Avijja. In all of these traditions, including Advaita Vedanta, you still surrender to Ishvara.
But Ishvara is that spirit in you, like the Atman. Is that the same?
For Shankara, no, Shankara would say Ishvara is different from you. This is a long story, Sylvia. This is
okay. I'm sorry.
But Sylvia, we can't do justice for this in 2 minutes. When we do the Vedanta Sutra workshop,
okay,
then we'll raise these issues.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, it's a perfectly fine question. I just can't do it. I can't do it justice in a 2-minute thing.
Okay, thank you.
You go online. I have a whole Vedanta Sutra course up on the website and just check,
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. So we'll take a couple more questions. Then I have to feed my guests, my friend. Remember we read the Dharma? Honor your mother and father, feed the guests. We gotta feed the guests. They're sitting there pining for food. I'll get very bad karma. Okay, Pasha.
Hi, Edwin. Thanks for today's class. I just wanted to ask, with regards to text, is there a list of authoritative hierarchy? I would assume it's the Upanishads first, and then Gita, Yoga Sutra, but what of other texts like Mahabharata, Brahma Sutra, Puranas? Is there some sort of hierarchy?
The tradition will all say this, that the most sacred texts are the Shruti, that which is heard, and that's the Vedas and the Upanishads, and 2 other things we don't have to worry about. There's four kinds of texts, but 2 of them nobody, Brahmanas and the Aranyakas, right? And then the Smriti, that which is remembered, is the Mahabharata, the Puranas, the Sutras, and pretty much everything else. So that's the formal hierarchy. But the fact of the matter is, all later Hinduism, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Tantra, it's all Smriti. And they will claim that they're actually interpreting the Shruti in the best possible way. So the text I work with, the Bhagavata Purana, says it is the ripened fruit of the Vedic tree. They don't reject the Vedas, but they claim that their traditions are fuller expositions, they're fuller elaborations on that which is contained in seed form in the Vedas. So the Vedas and the Upanishads basically are considered the highest. So anybody who wants to be a Vedantin has to write a commentary. So Shankara wrote a commentary, Ramanuja wrote a commentary. If you want to, all the lineages that we have today are our lineages precisely because they've written commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra. But in your lineage, you're going to do very, very different things from some other lineage. So my lineage is going to see Krishna all over the place. Well, we don't see Krishna in the Upanishads. Where's Krishna in the Upanishads? Maybe one verse in the Chandogya. So each lineage is going to work their commentaries, and they're going to interpret the Vedas and the Upanishads through the lens of their tradition. So the Krishna people are going to see Krishna all over the place. The Kundalini people are going to see Kundalini all over the place. The Shaivas are going to see Shiva all over the place. And that's what a lineage is. And so the lineages train you, they give you a lens, they train you to see that metaphysics everywhere, in the world out there and in your reading of the text. So you basically take the lens of your mind and you adapt it to the philosophy and teachings of the lineage, and then you read all the sacred texts through that lens. And you see the world out there through that lens. It's really a molding of the mind, but everything's a molding of the mind. Everything's, if you live in a consumer culture, what is a consumer culture trying to do? It's trying to mold your mind into buying stuff. We are trapped by the mind, Pasha. Until you become, all right, fine. If you have a Swarupa Vastanam experience 10 lifetimes down the road, that's a different story. But until then, we have a mind and we are trapped by that mind. And the question is, what do you do with it? Who are you going to let mold that mind? Are you going to get the television and the consumer culture and, nonsense, sitcoms mold your mind and sit in your mind? Or are you going to put the faith, which means dedicate your mind to one of these lineages? And these lineages all have different stories. They all have different ways. They have different philosophies, different practices, different, very different. Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Tantraism, Tantra with all its Kundalini and the chakras. There's none of that in the Upanishad. There's none of that in Vaishnavism. So they all have their specific, physiologies. They have their specific theologies. They have their specific, what's the goal? What's the grand finale? We call that soteriology. Is it merger? We read the verse. Or is it a personal relationship with the Bhagavan? Or do you become Shiva like in Kashmir Shaivism and see the whole universe as your Shakti? Very different goals. And all of them are, and what it means to be in a lineage is that you're molding your mind. You have somehow or other, you have faith in this particular lineage, other than rather than others. It doesn't mean you disrespect others. It's just that there's some scars in your mind right now in this life align themselves to a particular set of teachings, a lineage, and that makes most sense to you. Maybe you met a guru, maybe you read a book, maybe some powerful guru touched your heart. Whatever it is, you make this connection, and then for the rest of your life, you mold your mind around the practices and the teachings of that lineage. But someone else is doing the same for another lineage. Now, if you say, well, I don't want to mold my mind, well, my friend, you have no choice. If you don't mold it around a lineage, you're going to mold it around some consumer. You have to mold your mind around something. There has to be a metaphysics. There has to be a goal. There has to be a perception of the world. There has to be a way of seeing the world. That's a lens. So we have no option. There isn't an option to be free of the lens unless you go all the way. But even if you go all the way, you've accepted Patanjali's lens. If you say, I'm going to get beyond the mind, or I'm going to do Chitta-Vritti, right there, you have accepted Patanjali's method. That means you have faith in that, and you're molding your life around that. We cannot be free of the lens of the mind. We cannot be free of this lens. Our only choice is, what do we do with this mind? And what we have faith in? What satisfies our rational mind? Remember, these people are serious rationalists. They're scholars that represent the traditions, the theologians of these traditions, just like Augustine and Aquinas in the West. These theologians are intensely rational and powerful thinkers. So there's an intellectual component, there is a metaphysical component, there's an emotional component, there's a set of practice. These are what traditions are. There's a galaxy of traditions, and you get to choose one or not. If you don't choose one, you're going to follow some other tradition, like consumer capitalism. Why isn't that a tradition? That's a set of beliefs. That's a set of information. That gives you a goal. That tells you who you are. You're the body. That tells you how to find happiness. Oh, you'll find happiness through accumulation, through consumption. That's a soteriology. That's an epistemology, right? How do you know? Well, you sense perception. So all of these worldviews are little universes And here we are in this life, in this body, with the clock ticking, getting older. And either we don't do anything and say, oh, it's too confusing, there's too many. And then what? Die like uselessly, like a dog in the street, uselessly, just die. Or you say, okay, I realize I'm trapped by my mind. I realize I have, like Kant said, famous philosopher, you have no access to the phenomena, to the noumenon. You only see what space and time allows you to see. That was a major contribution of Kant in the history of philosophy. Or you say, okay, I'm trapped by my mind, and my mind already is a certain lens because of past lives. I've already worked my mind for so many lives. So I come with a certain set of samskaras. Those samskaras, if I seek sincerely, will align themselves around this tradition rather than that one. This tradition will somehow or other make sense to my rational mind. And if you get to that place, then go for it. I suggest that's a better use of the mind than just being agnostic and saying, well, I'm not going to do anything now. Oh, it's too confusing, too many different. Then what? How good is that in the moment of death? You're going to be on the deathbed and say, oh, I'm agnostic. Good luck with that. Remember Yama? Remember Yama? Yama's going to say, okay, you come with me, my son. All right. So we'll take one more question, and then we'll. I need to serve my guests. We got two hands up. Nasser and Tim will take the two questions, and we will. And then I have to take care of my guests. Nasser, were you in Rutgers? Were you in the Rutgers philosophy class?
I was, Professor.
Good to see you. You wrote to me, and I never wrote back. Were you offended?
No, not at all, not at all.
I was so busy. I was just overwhelmed. I almost always reply to my emails, but. It was a great big long email, wasn't it?
It was a decently written.
Here's the Upanishad. Here's the teaching. Short one question emails, then you get an answer. Go ahead, Nasser. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you as well, Professor. Thank you for the teachings today. I'll keep it short. I know you mentioned something about dualism and monism.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I would love for you to kind of expand on that and tell us how that connects to the whole conversation that we've just had about identifying the Brahman.
That's the whole question for Vedanta, Nasser. That's a huge question, but very, very quickly. Monism is that the Atman merges into Brahman when it becomes enlightened and is no longer an individual Atman. It becomes one with the whole. Think rivers into the ocean. No more rivers, they're ocean. That's monism. Dualism is that there's always going to be a distinction eternally in samsara and also in the liberated state between Atman and Brahman, who in the dualistic traditions, Brahman is a personal being. Supreme with infinite powers, infinite qualities. He's God with a big G, a really big G. So can we leave it at that? Because that's a huge issue. But if we do a Vedanta workshop, we will work this over and over.
I think that's good enough. Thank you, Professor.
All right. And do forgive me, please.
Please.
Okay. Thank you. If you don't forgive me, bad karma, man. Not only will I not get liberated, I won't even make a celestial realm. And that's not a good option. Tim, last question, my friends. Yeah. Did you put the rice on? Tim Barley, yeah. No, you're muted, Tim. You're still muted. I don't know how to. Do you want me to unmute you or what? No, you can do it. You can unmute yourself.
I think his mic isn't connected. He is unmuted.
Are you? You're Tim. There you are, Tim. I'm not muting you. More. Remove pin. Rename. No, it's not happening, Tim.
Professor, he's
putting a question in the chat box.
Tim, can we save it for next week? Are you going to join us next week? Would you mind? I promise you, you will get first question. Will you remind me though? Yeah, white hair. You got to remind anybody with white hair. All right, is that all right? Because I don't, otherwise you type it. Okay? All right, see you next week. Okay, everybody. Jai Sri Radhe Shah. I see that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.